The situation with regard to human rights violations can be very much focused towards the discrimination and the deprivation faced by the IDPs. If you look at the manner in which they are being resettled and the manner in which their security and protection issues have come to light, that raises grave situation for especially women who have to go back to their villages, and most of the women are single women. And if you go to certain villages, you'll find almost like 60% to 70% only single women. So the issue of post-war challenges for us mainly comes from the single women and younger women and the LTT former combatants who have to lead a normal life. But the LTT combatants, the women who have been released now, some of them, have to still go and report to the army. And in terms of settling down back in the villages, they face a lot of problems. The acceptance within the community, whether they will ever find the word security for the future. Then with regard to men and young boys, when I go visit some of the areas, I only see the elderly women, elderly men and some young people. I mean, young in the sense not the 19 years, 18 years boys, but a little older ones. And in some places I hardly see young boys. So they are either they are not there, or they have been sent away by the families, mainly due to the fact that as you go and live back in your villages, it is very much comes under military surveillance. So it is not normal in the north, and in the east, the robberies, thefts, murders of people happen because the police are also unable to investigate. So if you look at all in all, there are instances where people are afraid. The main human rights situation comes out of fear of the Tamil people now. They are not free to talk about their wants, their needs, their loved ones whom they have disappeared. So there is no justice coming to these people who have lost their husbands, their children have disappeared during the war, and when they came back to the camps, they disappeared. They still live with the sense of, if you talk, somebody will come and take them. So but in terms of numbers, disappearance is less, the government will claim. But on the other hand, we are still living within the Prevention of Terrorism Act and the Emergency Regulation Framework. From the side of, if you look at the emergency regulations, even though it is relaxed in some way, when it comes, they have even brought any strikes, agitations by the trade unions under the emergency regulations, which will be considered as trying to make it difficult for the government to govern. So even a trade union act can come under a terrorist activity if you define it within the present provisions of the emergency regulation. Sri Lanka has had a very robust trade union movement that worked for rights. And the present president was also a human rights activist in the 89 period. Thanks to him, during that period in Geneva, we managed to bring the disappearances issue into the UN, and the international attention was given to very grave situation in the 80s with regard to disappearances. The same role has to be played by the human rights activist, because we managed to have a period of democracy, protection, our mechanisms for protection of human rights, like the Human Rights Commission, was established during the early 90s, because there were leaders like Mahinda Rajapaksa who worked for human rights. So in Sri Lanka we still have same kind of leaders in the civil society who are working for human rights, and that work should continue. In a way, I don't see that as an anti-government thing. That's part of deepening democracy in a country, and you need to have checks and balances with regard to governance. So the Sri Lankan human rights community is continuing with its work to bring the violations to the notice of the international community, to the UN, and to see that protection issue for every Sri Lankan citizen is respected by the government. And also the Sri Lankan government has signed several UN conventions with regard to women. They have signed the Women's Convention. Sri Lanka has signed the ICCPR. Sri Lanka has signed the International Convention on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. We have signed the convention with regard to elimination of racial discrimination. We are a member country of the UN, which means that we have to respect the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So compliance with the Sri Lankan government is keeping to these pledges. And when in relation to Sri Lanka became a member of the Human Rights Council, giving a lot of pledges to respect civil society and to strengthen the UN system. So we need then, while the governments govern, violations take place, because practically states have to also deal with certain situations. But then there have to be a critical mass. There has to be another movement that will show the governments where violations are taking place, where there will be critical people, academics, lawyers, human rights defenders, who will have to bring to the notice of the rulers that these violations have taken place. No state can govern and say that that we are respecting everybody's rights. You have the armed forces, you have the police, you have the politicians, and it's an issue of power. And the people who have power in their hands will always have situations of marginalization, discrimination with regard to nationalities, ethnic communities. The workers will ask for workers' rights. Then there will be repression by the police. Sometimes they are settled with dialogue, but sometimes if you can't settle, there will be strikes. And what happens in the states will react with violence and with repression. So there have to be movements like trade unions, human rights defenders, lawyers groups who will resist. So that work of civil society is very important because that's the flavor of democracy. If in any country room is given to media freedom for people to criticize the governments, because there will be corruption in any government, There will be some of the politicians will act violently, like the minister Mervyn Silva, who will show his gun and who will say, I've got a licensed gun. If anybody try anything like that in Egypt, I will be the first one who will use it. Now, can we ignore a statement like that? A responsible minister in the government. So we have to criticize and we have to say that he must be pulled up. We have to bring this to the notice of the international community. Same goes with the president of a country. Just because he is elected as a president doesn't mean he can take action contrary to international norms, regulations, and contrary to the Sri Lankan constitution. So it's up to the civil society and the opposition political parties and those who are concerned citizens of the country to bring it to the notice of the international community. That's the role of civil society. That's why non-governmental organizations exist. If non-governmental organizations are going to join hand with the government, provide service to the government and remain silent, right? One arm of good governance becomes weak and dead. In democracy, you need to have this kind of a vibrant civil society. The civil society must have the freedom to say things. And then the government can reply back, can say, okay, this is wrong, right? And can investigate if what we are saying is wrong, without killing people, without abducting people, without detaining people, right? When a government is not listening to the voices of the people, then it goes to authoritarianism and dictatorship. Then it begins to kill the civil society. So the reason as to why we need to keep the civil society in Sri Lanka vibrant is to see that the Sri Lankan government does not move towards autocracy and dictatorship. And therefore the role of civil society is very important. And the space that we try to develop for freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of demonstration is important if democracy in Sri Lanka is to flourish.